The Iron Wolf Tavern had been on the corner of Garrison Street and Route 11 for 34 years. And in all that time, through bar fights and bust-ups and the full spectrum of human behavior that assembled itself in establishments that served whiskey after midnight, nothing had ever stopped the room the way the knocking did. It started at 11:42 on a Thursday night in November. 3 knocks. Small. The specific smallness of a fist that was not large enough to make much noise against a solid oak door. A fist that was doing its best with what it had. Most of the room didn't hear it. The Iron Wolf on a Thursday night had its own weather, the low-pressure system of conversation and pool balls and classic rock from the jukebox in the corner, and the specific ambient noise of 40-some people who had decided this was where they wanted to be. Most of the room was inside that weather, and the 3 small knocks were outside it. But the bar was tended by a woman named Gloria Sykes, who had been tending bars for 22 years and who had developed over those years the specific hypervigilance of someone whose job required her to track the room constantly. Gloria noticed sounds that other people filtered. She noticed the quality of silences and the change in conversation registers and the particular way a door opened differently when someone was carrying trouble versus when they were just coming in. She heard the 3 small knocks. She set down the glass she was drying. She looked at the door. The knocking came again. 4 times now, still small, still the specific smallness that she had a word for, and the word made her stomach do something. She came around the bar. She walked to the door. She opened it. The child standing on the other side was maybe 7 years old, maybe 8. It was difficult to tell in the dark and at first glance because she was small, and she was wearing a coat that was too large for her, and her hair, dark, loose, tangled from weather or from a long time without tending, was across part of her face. She was not crying. This was the detail that Gloria would remember later, that she described when she told the story. The child was not crying. She had been through whatever she had been through to get to this door, and she was standing there with her small fist at her side, and she was not crying. She had the expression of someone who had made a decision and was standing by it. She looked up at Gloria. "Can you help me?" she said. "Please." Gloria's name was Gloria Ann Sykes, and she was 44 years old, and she had worked at the Iron Wolf since she was 22, and had been the head bartender for 14 of those years, and she would later say to anyone who asked that she'd been in some version of preparation for this specific moment for all 22 of those years without knowing it. She crouched down. She was at the child's level. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I can help you. What's your name, sweetheart?" The child looked at her. Brown eyes. The specific wide-open quality of brown eyes in low light. "Violet," she said. "Violet Ann Marsh." "Hi, Violet," Gloria said. "I'm Gloria. Come inside, okay? It's cold." She put her hand out. Violet looked at the hand. Then she took it. Gloria brought her inside. The room noticed. It happened in the way things happened in the Iron Wolf when Gloria brought something to the room's attention. She had a presence at the bar that had accumulated over 22 years. A specific authority that was not performed but real, and when that authority moved through the room with purpose, people registered it. 40-some people in various stages of a Thursday night noticed Gloria come through the door with a small child. The room did not go silent. That would have required an announcement. But something changed in its register, the way a room's weather changed. Conversations lowered. People turned to look and then looked again. The pool balls went quiet. A man at the end of the bar, the last stool where he'd been for about 2 hours with a beer he was making last, looked up. His name was Frank Dolan. He was 51 years old. He was not large in the way that some men were large. He was average height, compact, with the specific density of someone who had been in physical work his whole life. He had a beard that was more salt than pepper now, and gray eyes and the kind of face that had been in weather without minding it. He was wearing his cut, the leather jacket with its patches, the Hells Angels chapter on the back, over a dark shirt. His hands, wrapped around his beer glass, were scarred on the knuckles in the way of someone who had used them over a long time. He was the president of the Garrison Street chapter. He had been coming to the Iron Wolf for 18 years. He had a table in the back that was understood to be his table on the nights he was there, and sometimes there were other club members at it, and sometimes there weren't, and tonight there weren't. He'd come alone, which he did occasionally when what he needed was the specific comfort of a familiar place that left him alone. He watched Gloria bring the child to the bar. He watched the child climb onto a bar stool with the focused effort of someone small getting onto something that was sized for someone larger. He put down his beer. He watched. Gloria set a glass of apple juice in front of Violet, and she watched the child wrap both hands around it with the concentration of someone very cold getting something warm. Except the juice was not warm, it was cold, but the gesture was the same, the holding of something familiar with both hands. "Violet," Gloria said. She came around the bar, not to the service side, but to the customer side, and she sat on the stool next to Violet. This was a thing Gloria did when the situation required it. She came out from behind the bar. She was a person, not a role. "Can you tell me what happened? Where are you coming from tonight?" Violet looked at her glass. "My house," she said. "Do you live nearby?" "On Caldwell," she said. "The apartments." Gloria knew Caldwell Street. The apartment complex on Caldwell was the one at the north end, the one that had been through 3 management companies in the past 5 years and looked it. The one where the parking lot lights were out half the time and the maintenance requests went to die. "That's about 6 blocks, Gloria said. "I walked," Violet said. 6 blocks. In November. At 11:42 in the evening, this child had walked 6 blocks alone in November at nearly midnight. "You walked," Gloria said, keeping her voice level. "Did something happen at home, sweetheart? Is someone hurt?" Violet looked at her glass. "My brother," she said. "He's sick. He's really sick. And my mom—" She stopped. She took a breath. "My mom is sleeping and she won't wake up and I didn't know what to do. I went next door first, but nobody answered. I didn't—" She stopped again. "I didn't know who to call. I walked until I saw the lights. The lights of the Iron Wolf. The specific warm light of a bar at 11:42 in November, visible from 6 blocks in the cold dark of a street where the apartment parking lot lights were out." "Your brother," Gloria said. "How old is your brother?" 3, Violet said. "He's 3. His name is Oliver." Something moved through Gloria's chest that she did not take time to examine. "How long has he been sick?" she said. "Since yesterday," Violet said. "He had a fever and he keeps crying, and his breathing sounds—" She struggled for a word. "It sounds like it hurts, and I gave him water, and I sat with him, but it keeps getting worse and—" She looked up at Gloria. "I didn't know what else to do." "You did exactly the right thing," Gloria said. She was already off the stool. "You did exactly the right thing, Violet. I'm going to call for help right now. You're safe here." She looked over Violet's head at the room. Frank Dolan was already standing. He crossed the room. He did it without hurrying. Hurrying would alarm the child, but with the specific efficiency of someone who was done waiting to be part of this situation. Gloria was already on her phone, the 911 call beginning as he approached. She looked at him, and he looked at her, and they had the communication that people had when they'd known each other long enough. She was handling the official call. He was handling the child. He sat on the stool on Violet's other side. She looked up at him. He was not a comforting-looking man. He knew this. He had been told this by people who said it as an observation, and by people who said it as a fact they were deploying for other purposes. He was not soft-faced and he was not small, and the leather cut was not the visual language of reassurance. He looked at her. She looked at him. She did not flinch. That was the thing he noticed first. She looked at him with the specific assessment of a child who was reading adults with the precision of someone for whom misreading adults had consequences. And she read him, and she did not flinch. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she said. "I'm Frank," he said. "I'm Violet," she said. "I know," he said. "I heard. Your brother's name is Oliver." "Yes," she said. "Help is coming," he said. "The woman on the phone, her name is Gloria, and she's very good at her job. She's getting help for Oliver right now." Violet looked at his jacket, at the patches. "Are you a biker?" she said. "Yes," he said. She processed this with the solemn attention she brought to all information. "My mom says bikers are dangerous," she said. "Some of them," he said. "Not all." She looked at him for a moment. "Are you?" she said. "To people who deserve it," he said. "Not to kids who walk 6 blocks in the cold to find help for their little brother." She looked at her glass. "He kept crying," she said. Her voice was different now. The steadiness she'd maintained was developing a crack, the way ice developed cracks before it broke, the specific sound of a child who had been holding something very large for a very long time. "He kept crying, and his breathing was wrong, and I didn't know how to make it better, and Mama wouldn't—" Her voice broke on the last word. "You found help," Frank said. He kept his voice exactly level. "You walked in the dark and you found help. That took something. That was brave." She looked at the bar surface. "Is he going to be okay?" she said. Frank had made it a practice of his life to not make promises he couldn't keep and not say things he didn't know were true. This practice had cost him in certain situations. There were moments when the comforting lie would have been easier. "People are going to get to him as fast as they can," he said, "and they're going to do everything they know how to do. That's what I can promise you." She looked at him. "That's not an answer," she said. "No," he said, "it's not. But it's true." She looked at her glass. She nodded. The ambulance arrived in 8 minutes. It was followed by a police car, and then another, which was the sequence that happened when a 911 call indicated a child alone in a bar and a sick toddler in an apartment 6 blocks away. The paramedics went to Caldwell Street. The police stayed. The officer who came to speak to Violet was a woman named Officer Chen, no relation to any character in any previous story, a real person at her real job, who had the specific quality that the good ones had, the quality of being able to be official and human simultaneously. She sat with Violet and asked questions in the careful way of someone building a picture from pieces. Frank stayed. This was a decision that was not complicated for him. He stayed because the child had been alone in this bar, and because he had sat beside her, and because something had begun when he sat beside her that was not finished. He stayed not in any official capacity. He had no official capacity here, but because he was not going to be the person who left. He sat at the end of the bar and he watched. Gloria came to him. "The paramedics are at the apartment," she said quietly. "The boy, Oliver, he's alive. They're taking him to Mercy General." Frank looked at Violet across the bar, who was answering Officer Chen's questions with the specific, careful precision of a child who had decided answering the questions was the right thing and was doing it completely. "How bad?" Frank said. "They said respiratory," Gloria said. "Could be croup, could be worse. They don't know yet." Frank looked at his hands. "The mother?" he said. Gloria's face did something complicated. "Still at the apartment," she said. "They're assessing." He knew what that meant. "CPS?" he said. "On the way," Gloria said. He looked at Violet. She was 8 years old. He had revised his estimate. The coat that was too large had added years initially, but when she sat with it open, he could see the size of her more accurately. 8, maybe, or young 9. She was 8 years old, and she had made herself responsible for a 3-year-old in an apartment on Caldwell Street, and she had failed to fix the thing she was trying to fix, and she had walked 6 blocks in November, and knocked on a bar door with her small fist and asked for help with a please at the end. He picked up his beer. He put it down. He hadn't wanted it in the first place. The CPS worker arrived at 12:30. Her name was Beverly Marsh, no relation to Violet's surname. The coincidence was only a coincidence. And she was in her 40s and wore the face of someone who had been called in at midnight too many times to count and had not become numb to it, which was, Frank had observed in his years of watching the world, the most important quality a person in her job could have. She spoke with Officer Chen. She came to Violet. Violet was beginning to show the fatigue that the adrenaline had been holding at bay. Her eyes had the particular heaviness of a child past her bedtime by several hours, and past her emotional capacity by an equal amount. She was still answering questions, still sitting upright, still maintaining the remarkable composure that had apparently been her operating mode all evening. Beverly sat with her. She was good at this, Frank could tell. She had the voice and the posture and the specific kind of attention that made children feel seen without feeling observed. Violet answered her questions too. Frank stayed at the end of the bar. At some point, Gloria put coffee in front of him without asking. He drank it. At 1:15, Beverly came to him. She looked at him with the professional assessment of a person who encountered a large man with a leather cut at a biker bar at 1 in the morning, and was deciding what that meant for the situation. "You've been sitting here the whole time," she said. "Yes," he said. "Why?" she said. It was a direct question, and he respected it for being direct. "Because she came in here alone, and I don't want her to be alone," he said. Beverly looked at him. "She's talked about you," she said. "She said a man named Frank stayed with her. She said—" Beverly paused. "She said she felt safer because you were there." Frank looked at his coffee. "That's something," he said. "I'm trying to reach family," Beverly said. There's a grandmother, Violet's maternal grandmother, who is the listed emergency contact. I haven't been able to reach her yet. And if you can't? Emergency placement, Beverly said. Tonight. Frank said nothing. I can see you want to say something, Beverly said. I'm wondering how this works, he said. If she goes to a placement tonight, she doesn't know those people. She's been through a significant night. She's worried about her brother. I know, Beverly said. I'm aware of that. Is there... He stopped. He was not a man who didn't say things. He had learned not to hold things back when they needed to be said. Is there a way she can be with someone she's met tonight? Someone she has a minimal trust with? Beverly looked at him. What are you proposing? She said. I'm not proposing anything specific, he said. I'm asking about the options, theoretically. Beverly was quiet. In theory, she said slowly, if someone were willing to be assessed and the child were comfortable and we could establish that the environment was appropriate, a temporary placement with a known contact is preferable to an unknown one. Known contact, he said. Known in the sense of, the child has met and interacted with the person and expressed comfort. Frank looked at Violet, who was sitting at the bar with both hands around her apple juice glass that had been refilled twice, watching him and Beverly with the assessment she brought to everything. She's watching us, he said. She's been watching everyone, Beverly said. She's been processing everything since she walked in. Frank looked at Violet. Violet looked back. She raised one hand, slightly, in the specific gesture of a child acknowledging someone across a room. Not a wave, just, I see you. He raised his chin slightly. He looked at Beverly. Tell me what a temporary assessment looks like, he said. Practically. The assessment was practical, as promised. Beverly asked him questions that were the questions of her professional assessment: residence, employment, other occupants, references. He answered them with the directness he brought to all things. Gloria, who had been listening from behind the bar with the specific right of someone who ran a room and was allowed to, offered herself as a reference before she was asked. I've known Frank Dolan for 18 years, Gloria said. He has never once, not once, in 18 years, done anything in this bar or in my presence that I would not want a child to witness. He is... She looked at him. He's the kind of person you want in a room when something goes wrong. I don't say that about many people. Beverly wrote things down. She went to Violet. She asked Violet, in the careful way, how she felt about Frank. She asked it without leading, without suggesting. She asked it in the open-ended way that Beverly's training required. Violet looked across the bar at Frank. He has a dog, she said. He has a picture in his wallet of a dog. Beverly looked at Frank. Frank looked at Violet. He did, in fact, have a picture of his dog in his wallet. He had taken it out at some point in the hour before, and it had been on the bar, and Violet had apparently absorbed this detail. What kind of dog? Beverly said. A brown one, Violet said. A big brown one. He showed me. Frank had not shown her. She had seen it while he wasn't looking. He filed this. Does that make you feel better about him? Beverly said. People who have dogs that they carry pictures of, Violet said, with the authority of someone stating a well-established principle, are usually good people. Beverly looked at Frank. Frank looked at the bar. Her words, he said. At 2:30 in the morning, Beverly made a phone call. Frank did not hear the full call. He heard the parts that were audible: professional language, assessment terminology, the specific vocabulary of a system managing a situation. He heard his name. He heard Violet's name. He heard temporary, pending, and emergency contact and environment assessment. He heard Beverly say, she expressed comfort. That matters. He sat at the end of the bar and he thought about what he was doing. He thought about it with the specific honesty he required of himself. He was 51 years old. He lived alone in a house that had 3 bedrooms, one of which was a study that doubled as a spare room and had been used in that capacity exactly twice in the past 5 years. He had the dog, whose name was Chester, a 7-year-old Labrador who was, at this moment, asleep on the couch Frank was not supposed to let him sleep on. He ran the chapter's garage operation, which occupied 5 weekdays and the occasional weekend. He had never been responsible for a child. He thought about Violet and her small fist knocking on an oak door. He thought about people who have dogs that they carry pictures of are usually good people. He thought about Oliver, 3 years old, at Mercy General right now, with respiratory distress and a sister who had walked 6 blocks in the cold to find him help. He thought about what it cost a child to walk 6 blocks in the cold. and he thought about what that child deserved when she arrived somewhere and knocked. Beverly came back. "Approved," she said. "Temporary. Through the weekend at minimum, pending contact with the grandmother, and pending Oliver's medical situation." Frank nodded. "What do I need to know?" he said. He carried Violet to the truck. He carried her because at 2:45 in the morning she had finally, absolutely, completely run out of the extraordinary resource she'd been running on all night. And when Frank stood to leave, she stood also and took 2 steps, and her legs had the specific quality of legs that were done. He looked at her. She looked at him. "Can you walk?" he said. She thought about it with the seriousness she brought to all questions. "Probably," she said, "if I had to." "You don't have to," he said. He picked her up. She was lighter than he expected, which told him things. She was, also, entirely relaxed when he picked her up. No stiffness, no resistance, the specific trust of exhaustion removing the capacity for caution. She rested her head against his shoulder with the completeness of someone for whom this was exactly the right thing. He carried her to his truck. He buckled her in. She was asleep before he started the engine. His house was 12 minutes from the Iron Wolf. He drove them in the specific quiet of late night, the city at its minimum, just the street lights and the empty intersections and the particular loneliness of streets at 3 in the morning that was not unpleasant if you were not lonely in yourself. He pulled into his driveway. He turned off the engine. He looked at Violet asleep in the passenger seat. He sat for a moment. He thought about what Beverly had said when she'd given him the list of things to know, the practical inventory of a temporary placement. She'd given him the list, and she'd also said, in a register that was different from the professional one, "She's been managing things she shouldn't have to manage. She's going to need to not manage things for a while. The best thing you can do is let her not manage." He thought about that. He got out of the truck. He went around to the passenger side. Violet woke when the door opened. Not fully, but partially, the specific partial waking of someone whose alert system hadn't fully shut down. "Where are we?" she said. "My house," he said. "You're going to sleep in the spare room. It has a good bed. Chester sleeps there sometimes." "Chester is your dog," she said. Her eyes were still closed. "Yes," he said. "The brown one." "Yes." "Okay," she said. He carried her inside. Chester, against all training, was on the couch and did not get off when Frank came in. He looked at Frank and then at the sleeping child, and he seemed to process the situation with the equanimity of a 7-year-old lab who had seen things. Frank put Violet on the couch long enough to turn down the spare room bed. Chester got down from the couch and came to investigate Violet. He sniffed her carefully. His tail moved. He went to his bed in the corner and lay down. Frank carried Violet to the spare room and put her in the bed with her coat off and the blanket up and the lamp in the hallway giving enough light that the room was not fully dark, because he did not know if she was afraid of the dark, but he was going to assume she shouldn't have to be. He stood in the doorway. She was asleep. He went to the kitchen. He sat at the table. It was 3 in the morning. The house was quiet in the specific way of houses at 3 in the morning that were usually empty and now weren't. The specific difference in the quality of the quiet when there was someone else in it. He sat with his hands flat on the table, and he thought about what had happened and what was happening, and what was going to happen next. He didn't know exactly what was going to happen next. This was not the usual state of affairs for Frank Dolan, who had spent 30 years of adult life making sure he knew what was happening next, who had built systems and structures and the specific operational clarity that came from being the kind of leader his chapter required. He sat at the table at 3 in the morning and he did not know exactly what was going to happen next, and he found, which surprised him, that this was okay. He got up. He checked on Violet. She was asleep on her side with the blanket around her, and her dark hair loose on the pillow, and her face, in sleep, had the specific quality of a child finally allowed to be a child, unmarked by the effort of managing. He stood in the doorway for a moment. He went to bed. She was awake before him. He discovered this at 6:45 when he came down and found her at the kitchen table with Chester beside her, the dog's large head on her knee and her left hand in his fur and her right hand wrapped around a glass of water she'd gotten herself. She had found the kitchen, gotten a glass, filled it from the tap, sat down. She was looking at the table when he came in. She looked up. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," he said. "I found the kitchen," she said. "I can see that," he said. He went to the coffee maker. You okay? She thought about it. Oliver, she said. I know, he said. I'm going to call the hospital as soon as it's a reasonable hour. It's a reasonable hour, she said. He looked at her. It's 6:45, he said. He's my brother, she said. He looked at her for a moment. Then he picked up his phone. He called the hospital. He gave Oliver's name. He explained the situation to the person who answered, who he was, how he was connected, what he needed to know. He was transferred. He waited. He was told what he needed to know, which was that Oliver was stable, that the diagnosis was croup with secondary respiratory involvement, that he was responding to treatment. He hung up. He looked at Violet. He's okay, he said. He's getting better. They said stable and responding. Violet closed her eyes. She did not cry. She kept her hand in Chester's fur, and she closed her eyes, and she held the information in for a moment with a stillness that was... He watched it, and it was the most complete thing he'd seen from her yet, the most specifically Violet thing. Dignified. 8 years old and dignified with her relief. Okay, she said. She opened her eyes. Okay. Do you want breakfast? He said. She looked at him. What do you have? She said. He opened the refrigerator and inventoried it aloud. Eggs, bread, cheese, leftover soup, various things in various states of remaining. He opened the cabinet. Cereal, oatmeal, coffee that was not relevant. She listened. Eggs, she said. I can make eggs. He looked at her. You don't have to make anything, he said. I know, she said. I like making eggs. I make them for Oliver. She paused. When Mama needs rest. He read what was between the lines of that. Okay, he said. Show me how you make eggs. She got down from the chair. She was shorter in the daylight than she'd seemed in the bar. Shorter and also, in a way that didn't diminish her, more precisely a child. The specific clarity of daylight. She was wearing the clothes she'd had on last night, and her dark hair was still loose, and she was 8 years old, and she had walked 6 blocks in the dark, and she was going to make eggs. She stood at the stove. She was too short for the stove. Frank pulled over a step stool from the corner. He had it for reaching the upper cabinet, had had it for years, never thought about its other applications. And she stepped onto it, and was at the right height. She made scrambled eggs. She made them with the specific, competent efficiency of someone who had done this many times. She cracked the eggs cleanly, and she whisked them, and she knew how to move the pan. When he reached for the salt, she shook her head. The salt goes in before, she said. Not after. It makes them fluffier. He put the salt back. She salted the eggs before. They were, demonstrably, fluffy. They ate at the kitchen table. Chester lay under the table and occasionally received a piece of egg from Violet's hand, which Frank noticed and did not comment on because the dog looked like he was not entirely unhappy about this arrangement. Your house is quiet, Violet said. Usually, he said. I like quiet, she said. She looked at the window. The November morning was gray and real outside. The specific gray of November that was not beautiful and was nonetheless something. Our apartment is, there's noise from the parking lot, and from the neighbors sometimes. Frank wrapped his hands around his coffee. How long have you been on Caldwell Street? He said. She thought about it. 2 years, she said, since Oliver was 1. Before that, we had a different apartment, she said. It was better. She said it factually, not with complaint, just the accounting. What about your grandmother? He said. Beverly had mentioned the grandmother. Grandma Ruth, Violet said. She lives in the county. She has a house with a yard. She looked at her eggs. She comes sometimes. She and Mama, she stopped. They fight sometimes, but she's good. She makes good food. She's the emergency contact, Frank said. Yes, Violet said. Mama put her down. Beverly, the woman last night, is trying to reach her, Frank said. Grandma Ruth. Violet nodded. She'll come, Violet said. When she hears about Oliver, she'll come. There was a certainty in this that Frank noted, not hopeful certainty, the certainty of someone reporting a known fact. You're sure about that? He said. She loves Oliver, Violet said, simply. She'll come. Beverly called at 9 in the morning. She'd reached the grandmother, Ruth Marsh, 63 years old, Violet's maternal grandmother. She'd been at her property in the county, 40 miles out, where the cell service was poor, and the evening before had not been a night of phone checking. She was coming. Beverly told Frank the timeline. Ruth would arrive by noon or 1. She asked how Violet was. Frank said she was okay. Beverly said that was, in her experience, an understatement in both directions. Okay was both more and less than Violet probably was. Frank said he'd take Violet to see Oliver. Beverly said she'd need to clear that and she'd call back in 15 minutes. She called back in 12, cleared. Frank looked at Violet, who had been sitting in the chair in the living room with Chester, reading a book she'd found on the shelf. A history book, which was not a children's book by any measure, but which she was reading with the focused attention she brought to everything. "We can go see Oliver," he said. She put the book down immediately. She looked at Chester. "He'll be here when we get back," Frank said. "Okay," she said. The pediatric ward at Mercy General was the specific brightness of pediatric wards, the designed brightness, the intentional color and light that was meant to offset the reason for being there. Oliver Marsh was in a room on the 3rd floor. He was 3 years old, and he had his sister's dark hair and his sister's brown eyes, and he was in a hospital bed that was the specific size of beds for small children, larger than he needed, which made him look smaller than he was. He had a breathing treatment tube near him, not attached at the moment, and monitors. He was awake. He was watching a cartoon on the small television mounted high on the wall with the specific focused attention of a 3-year-old who had found something more interesting than being in a hospital. He did not see them come in. Then he did. He saw his sister. "Vi," he said. Not a question, an announcement, a fact delivered with the full excitement of a 3-year-old discovering that the best thing that could happen had just happened. Violet was at his bed in 3 steps. She said nothing. She put her hand on his head. He looked at her and she looked at him, and the specific communication between a 3-year-old and his 8-year-old sister who had walked 6 blocks in the dark for him happened in that contact, hand to head, the language that didn't need words. "You sick," Oliver said, informing her. "You're the sick one," she said. "You came," he said. "I came," she said. "I told you I'd come." He appeared satisfied by this. He turned back to the cartoon. She sat in the chair beside his bed. She put her hand on the rail. She was going to stay there for as long as she was allowed to stay. Frank could see this. He didn't say anything about it. He sat in the chair in the corner of the room. Ruth Marsh arrived at 12:40. She was 63 years old, and she was the grandmother in the specific way that grandmothers were. You could see Violet in her, could see the dark hair that had gone gray, and the brown eyes and the facing forward quality. She was not a large woman, but she moved with the presence of someone who had been the adult in difficult situations many times, and had never stopped being the adult. She came into the room and she saw Oliver, and her face did the thing faces did. She went to him. She held him carefully, the care of someone knowing exactly what had been through the system he was attached to, knowing not to disturb anything. Oliver said, "Grandma," with the same announcement energy he'd used for Violet. Ruth held him. Then she looked at Violet. Violet looked at her. "You walked all that way," Ruth said. "Yes," Violet said. "In the dark," Ruth said. "There were lights," Violet said. "From the bar, I walked to the lights." Ruth looked at her granddaughter for a long moment. "Come here," she said. Violet went to her. Ruth held both of them. Oliver in the bed, Violet standing, both of them in the orbit of a woman who was going to figure this out. Frank stood in the corner of the room and watched. Ruth looked at him over Violet's head. She assessed him with the specific rapid assessment of a grandmother reading a room. "You're the man from last night," she said. "Frank Dolan," he said. "Beverly called me," Ruth said. "She told me what you did." "What I did was sit at the end of a bar," he said. "You stayed," Ruth said. "Yes," he said. Ruth looked at him. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. The afternoon passed in the way of hospital afternoons. The specific time of waiting rooms and assessments, and the incremental improvement of Oliver's breathing, and the conversation that needed to happen between Ruth and Beverly about what came next. Frank drove Violet back to his house for lunch while Ruth stayed with Oliver. He made soup, canned, real soup, the kind that came in a good can, not the kind that came in a novelty can, and he heated it properly on the stove. Violet ate at the kitchen table with Chester at her feet, and she ate with the appetite of someone who had not eaten properly in longer than last night. "Your grandmother is good," Frank said. "She's the best," Violet said. She said it with the complete certainty of someone stating the most fundamental fact. She's the best person. You'll go to her, he said. You and Oliver, when he's better. Violet looked at her soup. For how long? She said. He thought about the honest answer. I don't know, he said. There are things that need to happen with your mom. She's getting help right now. That's going to take time. Has she gotten help before? Violet said. She asked it with the directness of someone who knew the answer and was asking to see if he did. I don't know, he said honestly. She looked at her soup. She has, she said. 2 times. For a while it's better, and then… She stopped. I don't want to say it's not going to work this time. That's not fair. He looked at her. No, he said. It's not fair, and it's also honest. Both things can be true. She looked up at him. You say things how they are, she said. I try to, he said. Most people don't, she said. They say things how they want them to be. I've noticed, he said. She looked at Chester. Are you going to be involved? She said. After I go to Grandma Ruth's, are you going to… She stopped. She seemed to be choosing her words with a precision that was significant. Are you going to be someone I see again, or is this just last night? Frank put down his spoon. He looked at this 8-year-old girl who had asked him the most direct and most important question he'd been asked in years. What would you want? He said. She looked at him. I want to know Chester, she said. I'd like to know Chester better. He looked at Chester. Chester, as if aware of being discussed, raised his head. Chester would like that, Frank said. And you, she said. She was not going to let him off with the redirect. What about you? He looked at her. He thought about what he was going to say, about whether what he was going to say was true and manageable and fair. I'd like to see you again, he said. And Oliver. I want to know that you're both okay. That's not the same as being involved, she said. No, he said. It's not. She held his gaze. Would you be involved if I asked you to be? She said. He said nothing for a moment. What would involved look like to you? He said. She thought about it. Someone who checks in, she said. Not someone who fixes everything. I know people can't fix everything. But someone who is in the picture. Someone who… She struggled for the word. Someone who is there. Frank looked at the table. He thought about what there meant. He thought about it with the full attention it deserved. Not the romantic version of the word, not the aspirational version, but the practical version. The version that meant showing up, actually showing up in the specific ways that mattered. He looked at Violet. Then I'll be involved, he said. If you want that, I'll check in. I'll be in the picture. She looked at him. She had the reading adults look she'd had in the bar, the assessment look. You mean it, she said. I don't say things I don't mean, he said. She nodded slowly. She went back to her soup. After a moment she said, Grandma Ruth's house has a yard. You said, he said. Chester could come, she said. He looked at his dog. Chester likes yards, he said. Good, she said. Ruth called at 2 in the afternoon. Oliver was being kept overnight for observation. Standard in respiratory cases, the doctor had explained. Nothing alarmist, precautionary. He was dramatically improved from the night before. The cartoon consumption continued. Ruth asked if Violet could stay at Frank's house one more night. Frank looked at Violet, who was on the couch with Chester in the history book she'd resumed. Ask her, he said. Ruth asked Violet. Violet said yes with the equanimity of someone who had assessed the situation and found it acceptable. The second night was different from the first. The first night had been the end of an emergency, the coming down from adrenaline, the exhaustion of crisis, the unconscious sleep of someone who had used everything they had. The second night had a different quality. The crisis was over. Oliver was going to be okay. Ruth was coming tomorrow. The situation was not resolved. The larger situation was not resolved and would not be resolved quickly, but the immediate emergency was contained. Violet was still awake at 9. Frank found her in the living room, not reading, just sitting with Chester. She was looking at the window, at the November dark. He sat in the armchair. You can't sleep, he said. I'm thinking, she said. About what? She looked at the window. About what happens, she said. I know what happens next. Oliver gets better, we go to Grandma Ruth's, Mama gets help. I know that sequence. What I'm thinking about is—" She paused. "About what's after that sequence. About what it looks like when it settles." "The longer after," he said. "Yes," she said. I'll be 9, then 10, and Oliver will be 4, 5. And if Mama gets better, then we go back, and if she doesn't—" She stopped. "I'm trying to plan for different versions." Frank looked at her. "Violet," he said. She looked at him. "You're 8 years old," he said. "I know," she said. "You don't need to plan for all the versions tonight," he said. "You've been planning. You've been managing things for a long time. And you've been doing it very well. But you don't have to do it tonight." "I don't know how to stop," she said. He looked at her. He understood this. He understood it in the specific way of someone who had spent years developing the practice of control as a survival mechanism and had had to learn eventually that there were situations where the practice was not the right tool. "Can I tell you something?" he said. "Yes," she said. "When I was young," he said, "I was in situations where I needed to manage everything constantly, where stopping felt like, where it felt dangerous to stop, because if you stopped, something would fall." She was watching him. "And then eventually," he said, "I had people around me who I trusted enough to know that if I stopped managing for a minute, they would catch what fell. That the catching wasn't only mine to do." She looked at him. "I have Grandma Ruth," she said. "Yes," he said. "You do." She was quiet. "And me," he said. "For what I'm worth." She looked at him. "You're worth something," she said. "I can tell." He looked at the window. "Do you want to watch something?" he said. "There's a television." "What kind of something?" she said. "What do you like?" he said. She thought about it. "Animals," she said. "I like things about animals." He found a nature documentary. Something about the ocean, deep ocean, the specific light of bioluminescence in black water, the creatures that existed in the deepest part of things. They watched it. Chester fell asleep on the couch between them. Violet fell asleep 30 minutes in, her hand still in Chester's fur, her head tilting sideways until it was resting against the back of the couch in the specific position of someone who has finally, genuinely, let go of the management. Frank watched the documentary for a while longer. He thought about bioluminescence, the light that things carried in themselves, in the deepest dark, the light that existed not because there was a source outside, but because the thing itself contained it. He looked at Violet asleep. He turned off the television. He got Chester off the couch, gently, with the practiced motion of many years of this negotiation, and carried Violet to the spare room and put her in the bed again. He stood in the doorway. He thought about what she'd asked him. "Are you going to be someone I see again, or is this just last night?" He thought about what he'd said. He thought about what he meant by it. Ruth arrived in the morning. She pulled into his driveway at 9 o'clock in a truck that was old and clearly worked for its living. She was wearing practical clothes, and she moved with the specific purpose of a woman who had gotten in her truck at 7 in the morning to go get her grandchildren. Violet ran out before he could even say anything. She ran out of the front door and down the steps and across the dead November grass, and she went to her grandmother, and Ruth opened her arms, and Violet went into them completely, the specific completeness of someone finally reaching the person they'd been trying to reach. They stood in the driveway. Frank stood on the porch. Chester sat beside him. Ruth looked at Frank over Violet's head. She mouthed, "Thank you." He nodded. They went to the hospital to get Oliver. Frank drove his truck. Ruth's truck could fit everyone, but Frank was going anyway, which was a thing he hadn't announced but which had simply happened, the way things happened when the logic of them was self-evident. Oliver was discharged at 11. He came out of the hospital in Ruth's arms with the specific energy of a 3-year-old who had been in a hospital bed for a day and was done with that and ready for whatever came next. He saw Frank and Chester. Frank had, with the specific permission of a woman at the hospital entrance who looked at him and Chester and weighed the factors and decided the factors came out in favor. And Oliver looked at Chester with the expression of someone encountering something that required immediate and full attention. "Og," Oliver said. This was the 3-year-old word for dog. "His name is Chester," Violet told him. "Chester," Oliver repeated, with the solemnity of someone learning an important name. Chester, who was fundamentally an excellent dog, sat very still and let Oliver approach and reached out and touch his nose and then his ear and then his side, and Chester's tail moved throughout in the steady rhythm of complete acceptance. Violet watched this. She looked at Frank. "He likes dogs," she said. "I noticed," Frank said. "Like I said," she said. "People who have dogs that they carry pictures of." The afternoon was the afternoon of transition. Ruth had the practical intelligence of someone who had been through significant things and knew that the transition required real logistics. Clothes from the Caldwell Street apartment, which Beverly arranged with an officer present. Oliver's things. The specific objects that mattered, which were few but important. Violet's objects were minimal. She had them in the coat pocket and the backpack she'd had last night. She had a small notebook. She had a photograph of herself and Oliver that she'd taken with her. At Ruth's truck, loaded, ready to go, Violet came to Frank. She looked up at him. "You said you'd be involved," she said. "I said that," he said. "You have my grandmother's number now," she said. Beverly had given his to Ruth, and Ruth had given hers to him. "Yes," he said. "You'll call," she said. "I'll call," he said. She looked at Chester. Chester looked at her. She crouched down and she held Chester's head in both of her small hands, and she looked at him with the specific look of a child communicating something to an animal that the animal somehow received. She stood up. She looked at Frank. "You're a good person," she said. "I want you to know I think that." He looked at her. He was 51 years old, and he had been told many things by many people over many years, and he had developed the capacity to receive information without being destabilized by it. He was, for a moment, slightly destabilized. "Thank you," he said. He meant it completely. She nodded. She turned and got in Ruth's truck. He watched the truck go down the road. Chester sat beside him. He stood in his driveway in November, and he watched them go, and he thought about what the past 48 hours had been and what they had produced. He thought about 3 small knocks on an oak door. He thought about a child who had walked toward the lights. He called on Wednesday. He called Ruth's number, which Ruth answered with the voice of someone who had expected the call. "She's here," Ruth said. "One moment." Violet came to the phone. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. "How's Oliver?" "Better," she said. "He's been outside in the yard with Chester." "Wait, no, Chester's at your house." "Right," he said. "He's been pretending there's a dog," she said. "He carries a stuffed animal and calls it Chester." He stood in his kitchen with the phone, and he thought about a 3-year-old with a stuffed animal named Chester. "How are you?" he said. She thought about it. "I'm not managing things," she said. "I keep catching myself doing it and then stopping. Grandma Ruth keeps catching me doing it and telling me to stop." "Good," he said. "It's strange," she said. "Not managing." "You'll get used to it," he said. She was quiet. "Frank," she said. "Yeah." "Are you going to come this weekend?" she said. He had not been asked this. He thought about it. "Do you want me to?" he said. "Grandma Ruth's house has a big yard," she said. "I told you." "You told me," he said. "Chester would like it," she said. "Chester would like it," he agreed. "So would Oliver," she said. "He'd like to meet the real Chester." He stood in his kitchen. "What time on Saturday?" he said. She told him. He wrote it down. "We'll be there," he said. He brought Chester on Saturday. Ruth's house was the kind of house that had been lived in by a family for 30 years and had absorbed the evidence of it, the where in the right places, the permanence of things that had been there long enough to belong. The yard was large and had the winter-brown quality of November yards and had, at the moment of their arrival, Oliver in it. Oliver saw Chester from across the yard. He made a sound that was beyond vocabulary. Chester made his own assessment and arrived at full tail speed. They met in the middle of the yard with the specific joy of a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old Labrador discovering that each of them was exactly what the other needed, and they rolled in the dead grass together in the particular elemental way. Violet stood beside Frank on the porch and watched this. "He's going to talk about this forever," she said. "Chester will too," Frank said. She almost smiled. It was the first time, he noted it, the first time he'd seen her face do the specific thing that was close to, but not quite a smile, the thing that might become a smile if given the right conditions. "Come in," Ruth said from the door. "I made food." Ruth had made food. The food was the kind that a good cook made on a Saturday afternoon when the people coming mattered to her. Not elaborate, not performed, but real. Real food made with the attention of someone who understood that feeding people was a form of caring. They ate at the kitchen table. Oliver ate with Chester's head on his knee and periodically gave Chester things, which Frank noted and did not comment on because Chester looked exactly as satisfied as Oliver about this arrangement. Violet ate with the focused attention she brought to eating real food. Ruth watched all of this. After lunch, Oliver fell asleep on the couch with Chester, and the house had the specific quality of a house where a 3-year-old and a dog were both asleep in the same room. Ruth made coffee. She and Frank sat at the kitchen table. Violet was in the backyard with the yard in the November afternoon. "She talks about you," Ruth said. "Violet?" he said. "She told me what you said to her," Ruth said, "in the bar, when she asked if she was going to be okay. She said you told her the truth, that you couldn't promise her brother would be okay, but that you could promise help was coming." She looked at her coffee. "She said most people would have just said he'd be fine." "He might have been fine without help," Frank said. "Or he might not." "You didn't pretend to know," Ruth said. "I didn't know," he said. Ruth looked at her coffee. "She's been in situations for a long time where people pretended to know things," Ruth said. "About her mother, about the situation. People who said things that weren't true because the truth was harder." She paused. "She told me you don't say things you don't mean. She said she could tell." Frank wrapped his hands around his mug. "She's observant," he said. "Extraordinarily," Ruth said. "She always has been. From when she was very small. She watched everything, and she remembered everything, and she knew things you hadn't told her." Ruth looked at the window. "It's a gift and a burden. The kind of child who sees too clearly. It's a weight." He looked at the backyard where Violet was walking the perimeter of the yard with the specific attention of someone mapping something. "She's going to be okay," he said. "Yes," Ruth said. "She is. She's remarkable, and she's going to be okay." She paused. "What I want to make sure is that okay doesn't mean just managing again. What I want for her is something beyond the managing." Frank looked at the backyard. Violet had stopped at the far corner of the yard. She was looking at something. A bird, he thought, or a particular quality of the November light. She was still in the specific way she was still when she was paying full attention to something. "I told her I'd be involved," he said. "That I'd be in the picture." "I know," Ruth said. "She told me." "I mean it," he said. "I know that too," Ruth said. She looked at him with the look of someone who had assessed him and arrived at a position. "What does involved look like practically?" she said. "From where you're standing." He thought about it. "Calls," he said. "Visits. Coming here, having them come to me, being someone they know is there." He paused. The specific thing she asked for, she said she didn't want someone to fix everything. She wanted someone who was there. "I can be there." Ruth looked at him. "You have no obligation," she said. "I know," he said. "She knocked on a bar door," Ruth said. "You stayed with her a night. Nobody requires anything more of you." "I know," he said again. "So why?" she said. He thought about the answer. He thought about it with the honesty he always required of himself. "Because she walked 6 blocks in the dark and she knocked on an oak door with her small fist," he said. "And she stood there and didn't cry and she asked if we could help. Please." She said please. He looked at the backyard. "And I've been sitting in bars for 30 years watching the world from a stool, and I've gotten very good at knowing when something is the real thing. When something is. When something matters, and you'd be something lesser for walking away from it." Ruth was quiet. "She matters," he said. "Oliver matters. That's the whole answer." Ruth looked at her coffee. "All right," she said. "All right," he said. "All right," she said. "Then you're in the picture. That's what it is." She looked at him. "I'll tell you something, Frank Dolan. She hasn't had many people who stayed. Her mother, I love my daughter, but she hasn't been able to stay the way Violet needed. And the men who've been in the picture, none of them stayed." She looked at him steadily. "If you say you're staying, I need you to understand what that means to her." "I understand," he said. "Do you?" "I understand that she's been let down by people who said things," he said. "I understand that me saying I'll be there is worth approximately nothing without the doing of it. I understand that the test isn't this conversation. It's every call I make when it's convenient, and every one I make when it's not. It's being there when it's easy and being there when it's not. He looked at Ruth directly. I understand what I'm saying. Ruth looked at him. She nodded once. Then we're in agreement, she said. The months that followed were the months of the doing of it. He called every Wednesday. This became a thing, every Wednesday at 6 in the evening, which was after Ruth's dinner and before the children's bedtime. He called, and whoever answered the phone reported. Usually, Violet answered. Sometimes Oliver answered, which involved a briefer conversation that covered the important topics. Chester, yard, food, Chester. He came on Saturdays when he could, not every Saturday because he had the shop and the club and the specific commitments of his actual life, but most of them. He brought Chester every time. Oliver would hear the truck and be at the door before anyone else. He took Violet to the library once on a Saturday in December. She had mentioned in passing that she'd been wanting a specific book, and the county library had it, and Ruth didn't have a way to get her there that week. He took her. They were in the library for 2 hours. He read things he'd been meaning to read. She found her book and 3 others. In the parking lot on the way out, she looked at him. "Did you mind?" she said. 2 hours. "No," he said. "Most people mind waiting," she said. "I wasn't waiting," he said. "I was reading." She looked at the books under her arm. "I want to read everything," she said. "You will," he said. She looked at him. "How do you know?" "Because you read a history book at 6:45 in the morning after you'd been up all night," he said. "That's not something that needs outside encouragement." She looked at her books. She was, he thought, somewhere between almost smiling and actually smiling. And the thing she was doing with her face was the specific thing of someone deciding whether to let themselves have something. She let herself have it. She smiled. Christmas. Ruth's house. She'd asked him to come, specifically and directly, in the way she asked for things, not hinting, not suggesting, but saying it. "Will you come for Christmas?" He said yes. He brought Chester, and he brought things. Not elaborate things, the right things, which required knowing what the right things were. For Oliver, a toy that made sounds, which Oliver immediately mastered and deployed constantly. For Violet, a book he'd found at a proper bookstore, a specific book about a girl and a specific journey, the kind of book you knew was right the moment you read the first page. She opened it. She read the first page, standing in the living room in the middle of Christmas morning. She read the first page, and she looked up. She looked at him. "How did you know?" she said. "I've been paying attention," he said. She held the book. She stood in Ruth's living room on Christmas morning with the book in her hands and her dark hair in 2 braids that Ruth had done, and Oliver on the floor with his sound-making toy, and Chester in the orbit of Oliver, and something in her face that was not managed and not held back, and not the apparatus of a child who had been managing things for too long. It was just her, just Violet. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome," he said. After Christmas dinner, after Oliver was asleep and Ruth was in the kitchen with the specific winding down work of a household that had fed people, Violet came to the porch where Frank was standing with his coffee in the December cold. She stood beside him. "Frank," she said. "Yeah." "I wanted to ask you something," she said. "Ask it," he said. "When you decided to stay," she said, "that night, when you could have just... when Gloria had it under control and the police came and CPS came and you could have gone back to your stool and..." "Yes," he said. "Why didn't you?" she said. He looked at the December dark. He thought about the 3 small knocks on the oak door. He thought about the wide brown eyes. He thought about, "Can you help me, please?" "I heard you knock," he said. "Across a room full of noise, I heard 3 small knocks on a door. And something..." He paused. "Something in the quality of it told me, this is a thing that matters. And I've learned over a long time of paying or not paying attention to things, that when something tells you that, when the specific thing that lives below all the noise says this is a thing that matters, you listen to it." Violet was quiet. "I'm glad you listened," she said. "Me too," he said. She looked at the dark. "I walked toward the lights," she said. "That's what I was doing. I couldn't see anything else and I walked toward the lights." "I know," he said. "And the lights were the bar," she said. "The Iron Wolf has been a light on Garrison Street for 34 years, he said. "Your grandmother would say something about that being poetic." "She would," Violet said. She was quiet. "Frank," she said. "Yeah. I'm going to call you when things happen," she said. "I want you to know that. I'm going to call you when good things happen and when bad things happen. Both. Not just when I need help." He looked at her. "Good," he said. "And I'm going to come see Chester," she said. "Chester would be devastated if you didn't," he said. She almost smiled. Then she did smile. She looked at the December dark. "This is a good Christmas," she said. "Yes," he said. "The best one in a while," she said. He held his coffee. "Next one will be better," he said. She looked at him. She didn't ask how he knew. She had learned over the months to receive certain things he said as the things he was. Facts. She looked at the dark. "Okay," she said.